Hey there, welcome to the channel. So today we're going to go over a few things. We are going to review the S&P, some basic charts, looks like kind of a bloody day. And then we're also going to take a look at kind of one aspect of the Russia-Ukraine situation, the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. Okay, so let's get started. So here we're looking at the SPY today as a proxy for the S&P 500 down 1.77%. Now, one thing to kind of notice here is that, this is a pretty bad bar. That's a pretty big move down bar. And the other thing to note about this as well is that it looks like, see, in this area, we got this support, right? And we kind of really just solidly broke through that support. I mean, look at that thing. Let me try to zoom in a little more on this. Yeah, so looking at this a little closer, you have this support, on the SPY, you have the support at 425, and look at that thing. Look at that thing. It just broke down below, right below that, and significantly and very strongly it did that. So that was definitely a bad day, and it's broken through support from, whatever, 6 months ago, and the most recent support, more importantly. So this is like we're putting in new lows. Now, look at, I understand, like this little wick on this weekly, I'm sorry, daily, this little wick, like we're holding just above it, but look, there's very little there. There's very little at that point. So, I mean, it's really important that we've broken through the bodies of this, and we're broken below the resistance from back here. Now, the good thing is there's little points of potential support at other places that were on the way up, but we'll have to see. And the volume was pretty heavy. It's above the average volume. The average volume has picked up in the last few months, and we're above that. So looking at that picture, it's not really a great thing. Okay, so what we're going to do now. Okay, so let's look at the Qs today. It's even worse on the Qs. Look at this. See, on the Qs, now we broke through. Here you broke through this recent lows. It broke well through that we've been below that. And now we're heading down towards something down here, probably at the 315 level or something. So that was another really bad day there for that index. Yeah, heavy, reasonably heavy volume too. Looking at the Russell. Now, Russell's kind of interesting because it had gotten beaten up more, been weaker overall, but now it's still, once again, a bad day, 1.87%, but it's still above the most recent lows. So that's kind of interesting. So in kind of an interesting kind of way, it's a little better. And then RK looked blue through there, just been getting the crap kicked out of it. Kathy's been having making some moves around Palantir and other things like that. So I don't know. I don't know if she's lost things. Gold picking up, looking at that big picture on gold that I had pointed out the other time. Gold has this huge base. It really looks to be breaking out. I mean, we'll see how far we go. This is not financial advice for me. I don't have any gold right now, and I kind of missed this, so I'm not always on things. You miss it, don't jump in on it, right? So what I would do is, if I was interested in some gold, and this is not financial advice, I'd have to wait, and it might take a while, but I have to wait for some kind of a pullback and it to start coming out before I could put in a buy point, something like that, because it's just too overextended. And what the consequence of this means is that, I could miss the whole thing. This could just go and go way up into the moon and miss it, but you got to miss it sometimes. That's just my perspective on it. And the other thing I want to look at here is TLT. So it's not, see, that's the one like that we might get an impulse on it. And then the yield on the 10-year kind of ticking up today. So overall, kind of really bad day, so we got Russia moving into Ukraine. Have heard of some shelling, but we're not getting, it's very interesting because someone that grew up, at times watching like the first Gulf War, there was all this just like CNN at the hotels in Baghdad as it was being bombed by stealth aircraft and stuff. So it was actually very interesting to watch. Horrible because people are dying and getting killed, but this one there's getting very little information. We did see some power plant, there was some shelling, something got was burning, but we're just not really getting a lot of information. Now maybe there's not a lot happening at this point, things are being positioned, or there is stuff happening and we're just not getting any kind of information. So that's kind of where we stand. Looking just really quick, dynamic yield curve. This is great. This tool from this stock charts, this is great. You can just, here's the S&P 500 on the right. You just kind of move to the position and you get a snapshot of what the yield curve was at that time. So where we are now is, we're kind of still flattening. Yield curve still flattening. I suppose on what numbers you use, is it inverted? Not really. The 30s kind of anchored, the 20 looks a little higher. So a little bit of an inversion, and it's kind of flat in this area, but that hasn't happened yet. And this I wouldn't expect to happen until they really start cranking the rates. So as you go up here, let's take this period of time, see how that 30-year is anchored. Now notice how it's much higher. It's anchored at like over 5%. It's about 5%. But see how the Fed raising rates, stock market going up, flat, invert, boom, boom, boom. Stock market can come down, undo it. All right. Now, the next thing to look at. So here's the thing. Germany has put a hold and a suspension on the approval of this gas pipeline in response to what's happened with Russia and Ukraine here, Nordstream 2. So this is this big pipeline, and this is CNN, and they're showing where it goes. And of course, here's one of the things. First of all, it's okay. Let's look at the title of this article. At long last, gas pipeline Nord Stream 2 has been suspended. A terrible idea from its conception, and now, with Russia on the brink of second invasion of Ukraine, finally ground to a halt. Okay, so this person obviously is not a fan of this, and even the title here, good riddance Nord Stream 2. Okay, so look, the thing is, obviously they've suspended it for now, but it's not done. The pipeline's sitting there. I'm sure they're just going to put neon gas in there, whatever, just to hold it. They're not going to let it rust. They're not going to let it get destroyed. And this is, of course, very short-term thinking, because you look at this a year from now, 2 years from now, sure enough, quietly, suddenly there'll be some testing. A little after that, there'll be some gas flows. It's going to come back on pretty much no matter what happens in Ukraine. Now, if Russia scales back what they do and they only just annex these few regions and don't really do much more, then definitely this thing will come back within a year. I don't even think it'll take that long. If they just annex these two breakaway regions and they actually just stabilize everything, then I think it would be come back quick. If they go do a bunch more, then yeah, it's probably going to take more time because it's going to get more bloody. It's going to be more problematic if they go all the way to Kiev. And, as I've presented other videos, I mean, maybe they would do that. But, I'm not sure that's really the case. And also Germany really needs this. But I want to also point out here, it's really disappointing because you have all these people and you can tell just as this person goes on, this is a great opportunity for Europe to, make their commitments to switching over to renewables and all this stuff. In Germany, natural gas is responsible for 20% of carbon emissions, blah, blah, blah. They have the 2015 UN Paris Accord, and this is a great EU Green Deal that, this is their opportunity to step up to the plate and make renewable. Okay, so you're talking Germany, you're talking that part of Europe. Look, how much sun do they get? I live in Southern California, so I get plenty of sun. I mean, solar power makes a lot of sense here. And hey, more power to you. I mean, hey, save money on reduce the load on the grid. It's a good thing. I'm not against it. But to sit there and say that Germany is going to be able to magically switch over to all these forms. Remember, hydroelectric is demonized as well because there is environmental impact. These huge dams, they're not free, even with fish ladders and stuff. There's a problem. Trust me, my dad had a hydroelectric plant that was, part of a mill building from, 200 plus years ago. I mean, the darn initial parts of the building were built before the Civil War. So, I mean, old, right? But I can assure you that, there's many environmental things that want those dams ripped down, want that power removed. So that's not a super easy thing. But really, the issue here is this we get into this situation. Okay, you have to cut energy consumption. Okay, well, how do you cut energy consumption? I mean, look, you can do some things, and obviously you should do those things, but it's not a magical solution. Usually our energy consumption is cut when we go into, a depression, when we shut down the economy, as we did in the, shutdown for the Great Cerveza sickness, right? Only 1% of Europe's buildings are renovated high quality insulation. Once you start talking about insulation, you're off the planet. The simple fact is that we're going to have a very huge energy problem, and we can go back here and we can kind of look at where we're sitting with what Texas Intermediate crude and get a feel for that. We're near $100 a barrel, and this in essence is the problem. If you're going to switch to renewables, you gotta understand that you can't just magically demonize fossil fuels and expect to, like, that magically. We demonize fossil fuels, we do all this stuff to make it difficult to explore for natural gas and oil, and then we're just going to raise the price of it really, really high, and then we're just going to see where things fall out. And no, you're going to shut down the economy. So yes, you will reduce your emissions, but at the same time, you're talking about the lives of billion people that are going to be seriously affected, because you're doing it wrong, because you're not actually coming to the actual solutions. You're not looking at basic science. You're not looking at physics. The energy density of solar power, wind power is just not enough to replace what you get out of natural gas and coal. So natural gas is a great intermediate type of fuel. But to do the big switch, you have to do much more radical things. I mean, you have to go back to nuclear, right? And we have to do it differently. We need molten salt reactors. We need new designs that are self-healing in a way, meaning that when something breaks, it's like you don't have a meltdown, because Fukushima is a disaster, and it's still a disaster. Like, they have thousands of tanks, and they get the next earthquake, the next thing, all those tanks are going to go into the water, and they're highly radioactive, and it's going to up the level of radioactivity in the entire Pacific Ocean. So so in other words, we need to look for real solutions, and this kind of stuff is really sort of just nonsense. So I'm not buying it. I don't think that this goes away for very long. I agree that depending on whether how far Putin goes, if he goes really far, if he takes over the entire country, then yeah, it's going to be a big problem. But if not, then what it's going to be is more of just a short-term thing. And that's kind of the way it looks right now, just very short term. So I think this thing could be back online in a year or two easily. So that's my thoughts for this. And I would say one more thing. I would say, look, if you're one of these green people, I get it, but you got to start looking at real solutions. This simple view of well, okay, just use better insulation, this, that. And the problem is, it looks like a great solution. This kind of thing looks like a great solution. And you're like, oh, well, just do this and do this, and we can save power. Yes, you can, but the other side of the coin is it's not very sustainable. There are so many problems in the world that we need more power for. I'm in this, the American Southwest, we have a water problem. We can conserve. All that stuff is great, but you still have a water problem. So what do you need to do? You probably need to do desalination. Okay, desalination could be environmentally bad. Okay, yes, could be. So to do it with minimum impact, the scale of it probably has to multiply 100 million times. And then at the same time, you probably need a mass amount of energy. So there are so many problems. And then it even flips back all the way to carbon capture. Carbon capture solutions may end up being very energy intensive. Now, obviously, if you burn coal plants to run carbon capture to take carbon out of the atmosphere, that makes absolutely no sense. However, if you had liquid molten reactors, new designs that are much more safe, that don't require the energy being at the water. If you can get that kind of energy up, you can solve lots of problems with your supercomputing, letting this stuff just run, solving water problems that you have, solving flooding problems. You can solve so many problems by thinking in abundance instead of conservation. Look, at the same time, it's funny, I work in chip design, and where we are, trust me, every clock cycle, I work so hard to get rid of and turn off the clock, every clock cycle, everywhere I can. And so that's what like the entire industry is doing. We're doing that. Why? For mobile, right? We want to save power, but we've done a lot of that. So to keep thinking that you can just get away with continuously conserving more and more and saving more and more, it's diminishing returns. So real solutions are going to have to come up with an entire new situation, an entirely new way to do things. And so my challenge to you, if you're one of these green people that thinks and agrees with this article, how wonderful opportunity this is, well, I would challenge you to think more about it. You're a green person, think yellow. Go on and move on up. So in the big picture, really rough market today. It's probably going to get worse until there's some like a resolution, until we get to some idea of actually what Putin is going to do. And in the meantime, is it an opportunity to like magically we're going to implement Green New Deals? I don't think so. All right, that's it for this one. Bye.